Hi guys, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Jen, the Marketing Manager at Experience, and I'm going to pass over to Sam, who is our Cybersecurity Director. He's going to be hosting the webinar, and there will be a slot for Q&As at the end. So yeah, I'll, without further ado, hand it over, and we'll grab your questions at the end.
Hi everybody. Just a quick run through for today. We've got a couple of sections on response to we have a quick welcome session that Jen just did, a quick run through of the growing cyber threat landscape, some common misconceptions, some piece about understanding your risk exposure and practical steps to reduce the risk. We've got, as Jen said, a short Q&A. If anybody has any questions on the way through, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll pick them up at the end. And a short recap. So to jump straight in, the growing cyber threat landscape. First of all, phishing attacks, something that we all come across almost on a daily basis, and any of the big breaches that have happened over the past few years, phishing is commonly a large part of that initial incident. We have ransomware. Again, this is normally something that happens right at the end of a incident, phishing at the beginning, ransomware at the end. Very noisy, very disruptive, and also it causes a huge amount of disruption right at the end. Data breaches, this is something that is quite commonly overlooked. So after an incident has happened, or someone's gained access to data, that then gets posted out, sold, and that reputational damage ongoing is something that really sticks with the company. Is very difficult to kind of undo. Once it's on the internet, it's there forever. So it's always tricky. Supply chain attacks, this is something that has been more and more prevalent over the past few years. A large one a couple of years ago around SolarWinds, which has just had a huge impact. It's something where the likes of your MSP is normally quite a large target, hence the investment you typically see in cybersecurity and risk management. And lastly, we have human error and insider threats. Mostly when you look at the likes of any of the Netflix breaches or PlayStation and things like that, they've all been down to some sort of human error. Now, insider threat isn't necessarily a disgruntled employee. It could be that they're being blackmailed or anything similar, and really getting a culture where everybody's open and honest and quick really helps combat that. Common misconceptions. So here are a few just thought pieces that we hear quite often. So I don't have the data. In terms of risk and risk management, understanding and kind of being able to quantify the risks is typically a daunting task, and quite a lot of organizations don't know where to start or feel that they don't have enough information that they're going to get kind of value out of it for the time they're going to put in. So it's always a surprise once you start any type of risk management process, how much you know, how much you have, and also how much risk there is once you start getting into it. You don't necessarily have to know every piece of information, but kind of getting started and getting the information down and thinking the scenarios through is the first step. The concern, especially around cyber risk, is I can't put an exact value on the risk, and therefore I don't know how to prioritize it and things like that. So again, it's a get started. It doesn't matter kind of how much uncertainty you have around how much it's going to cost, and that value isn't necessarily monetary. You could use time it takes to restore a system following an incident, or number of devices affected, and purely the kind of impact across your organization. Don't have the skills or knowledge, so you don't need to be an expert in risk management to start the process. You don't have to know everything about every system. It's definitely team sport when it comes to risk management. It's everybody's responsibility to make sure the information is as accurate as it can be. And then we have, I need to restart my risk management process from scratch. So when it comes to cyber risk, there's typically a kind of fear again when you kind of put all of those previous three together, that I don't know enough about cybersecurity to be able to understand the risk correctly. You don't need to start any of your previous risk management processes again. It's all about adopting what you have done and making it fit for purpose. Creating a whole new process team to go through it is more than likely going to cause more friction than anything. So any prior business related risk processes or risk management that's already in place, try and utilize the tools, try and utilize the team and people to make the most traction. So understanding your risk exposure, these are just a few questions to start the process, start thinking about what cyber risk you have on hand and how much impact would it have. So firstly, we have what are the most critical assets in your business. This is something that people typically will jump towards their intellectual property or HR records, things like that. There are lots of different methods to this to identify it, and it's the start of any kind of good business impact assessment process that you go through. Understanding your critical assets lets you kind of focus in, and you'll normally be surprised how many assets you have across your business once you start identifying them and then categorizing them. What threats pose the greatest risk to your operations? Cyber risk comes with many factors, be it people, premise, monetary and financial, especially as banks freeze your accounts and things become very tricky. Going through each of your operational flows and teams and truly understanding their impact across your business is a very good reminder of an event. It's again not a if it will happen, it's a when, and understanding those events that can happen, be it ransomware or it's a natural disaster or similar. There's an actual you need to truly understand the risk and impact on hand. A natural disaster, for example, may seem like one of the extremes with the biggest impact that businesses typically kind of accept and have business continuity plans for. However, just starting very small, if everybody's got a laptop, it's very simple to ensure everybody can work from home. It's small pieces like that that really help you understand what would the impact of a cyber attack on your business. So actually walking through the process, running through those scenarios and really think about what would happen and what would you do. Documenting that in even a very simple format means that when the time comes, you have some guidance rather than we don't have enough information to be able to get a full fledged out process or anything together. Just having having something is much better than nothing in this scenario. And truly looking at what security measures do you currently have in place. Typically, these grow over time, be it from regulation that changes, compliance need, or if it's a client that you have has put some specific needs in place. Going through those controls on a regular basis helps identify where you have gaps that you're not filling, and as you go through the risk management process, you can really identify what is fit for purpose and helps you mitigate, transfer, or accept those risks. And then we have, how do you balance security investments with business operations? This is always an individual decision for every single business. So each business has a different risk acceptance and risk tolerance. It's always a very difficult conversation in terms of security versus usability, and the costs involved. Again, without doing this yourself, it doesn't matter what other businesses you look at or how they've gone through processes or what outcomes they've made. Every situation will be different. So truly knowing and being confident of the investment you're making and its impact is incredibly important. Risk management. Ignoring risk is accepting risk. This is something that I will typically remind as many people as possible who haven't given too much time or been able to put too much effort into risk management or even reviewing risk, especially when it comes to cyber. If you, as it says, ignore the risk, the only thing that can be is accepting it. So there's multiple choices when it comes to risk management. So you've identified your risk, you've scored it based on the various different criteria you can use. One of those is impact and likelihood, which is quite commonly used. You can avoid the risk. So you don't pursue the activity, you completely stop, and therefore that risk doesn't exist anymore. You can accept the risk. This is making an informed decision to do nothing at all. However, you do have to live with the consequences. Typically, accepting the risk is made after all of the other avenues have been exhausted. This is something that ensuring everybody in the risk management process truly understands across the business, because once it's accepted, you've kind of agreed not to do any more or not to do anything further to either treat or mitigate the risk. Speaking of the risk, this is directly taking action to reduce the likelihood and impact of risk. This involves implementation, management, and maintenance of technical and non-technical controls. And overall, it reduces the impact if one does occur. You may hear treat as mitigate on a risk register or similar, or reduce. And then we have transferring a risk. So this is shifting risk to another party, or transferring the impact or consequence over to somebody else. This could be whether it's outsourcing some services, it can be through insurance, and you'll typically hear it as sharing a risk, which is definitely the way to look at it, because the consequence of the risk is normally at that point shared. So reputational damage is typically one that will cross over, because that's something that you can't really ensure the reputation back into place, unfortunately. So practical steps to reduce your risk. These are some very simple steps and simple things you can put in place that hopefully will help get you kind of started. So implementing a risk-based security strategy. This is around prioritizing the efforts. So this is around the investment and ensuring that when you do invest time and money into starting to treat the risks, they're having their best bang for buck effectively. That's the easiest way to get the business kind of rallied together towards a single purpose, is to truly understand the impact expected, but also to measure the expected risk reduction. Because if the expected investment ends up being more than expected, having to put more money in, or actually the impact is not as successful in reducing the risk, it's really important to be able to measure that and go back, so that there's continual improvement throughout the business. Adopting multi-factor authentication. This is one of the, it feels an incredibly old step. However, we see it too often that multi-factor authentication is a no-brainer for most businesses, companies, and systems, but there's still an incredible amount of systems out there that don't have MFA as an option, or it's not implemented thoroughly across all the users. Multi-factor authentication, we actually have some demonstrations of this where it can be avoided. However, it is a huge stumbling block for any kind of attack, especially automated attacks. Third, we have conducting regular security assessments and risk assessments. The risk will continuously change and adapt and evolve over time, as your business does and your staff do, and products and services do. Having a regular assessment, as regular as you can do it sensibly, and with as much thoroughness as possible. So keeping it as a continual process rather than a one-off. Again, we will typically hear people say that compliance, the security, and typically going through the risk management process really identifies that there is a significant amount of cyber risk that is way out of any compliance boundaries that you're more than likely to put under. Training your employees on cybersecurity best practices, getting a true understanding of your employees' weaknesses, along with training them to make sure they actually have the correct understanding, and it's consistent across the organization, means it starts to be slightly more predictable. However, unfortunately, we all are fully aware that humans aren't as predictable as we hope. It can change per day. And lastly, establishing a cyber incident response plan. Truly understanding what the expectation is in a moment when everybody becomes concerned and wants to get the correct outcome when an incident has occurred. Practicing is the answer to this. Fully understanding whose responsibilities, whose roles and responsibilities are required throughout the process, and then making sure they're executed as quickly and effectively as possible. That leads us over to a Q&A. This is
almost completely open.
I've got a few questions, Sam, so I will get those up. So we've got 4 questions at the minute. I'll just go through them chronologically. So with the evolving nature of cyber threats, how can we predict and prepare for emerging threats that may not yet be recognised or widely recognised?
Yep.
So
the key
to almost the zero-day approach. I don't know if there's an echo. Just quickly mute everything. So in terms of emerging threats or unknown threats, having a clear understanding of what you have, where it is, and how it's operating is crucial. So actually understanding the scope of what you're at risk, and where your risks may actually exist, means you're prepared. So have a continual cycle of being prepared for things to happen, but obviously we can't predict everything and unknown unknowns. But having a partner that or people in your organization that are looking at the trends, understanding how the industry is changing, and unfortunately cyber criminals are evolving as well, is being able to respond as quickly as possible to those things. So having a true understanding is the first step, understanding what you have and what your current risk is. And then you can, as soon as any intelligence happens that allows you to get given an inkling of different technologies, or there's many factors, but geopolitical is one that crops up every now and then, and being able to very quickly, as part of that process, go through and assess that new piece of intelligence against what you you have is going to be the key. So being prepared and having as clear understanding of what you've got on hand is the best start.
Okay. And there's is there a risk in overestimating or underestimating the potential impact of a cyber threat on a small business? And how can we assess that true risk exposure?
Yeah, so there's a couple of formats for this. So one is to run the scenario. So say, for example, you are looking at, you've got a web application that you have, and on paper, that's your only external facing service. And it, therefore, because it's your external facing service, everybody's hyper concerned that that's going to be the biggest issue. People can get at it remotely. Therefore, it's the only way you could be attacked and only way you could get breached, which then would lead you to score that incredibly high in multiple areas. This is where understanding that asset is important. So understanding, okay, yep, it's external facing, that's one of its many characteristics. Okay, does it have any data itself in it that is of high value or personally identifiable? Is that system connected to anything else? Is it connected to a domain or any other systems? Or is it completely segregated? Is it purely a brochure website? Has it got any functions on it, things like that? And understanding kind of the complexity and also the value of that asset then lets you be able to kind of assess it correctly, because the key sentence of it's our only external facing service is something that in isolation would make it a very, very high risk. However, once you start actually taking all the other factors into play, it can reduce right down. When I talk about running the scenario, having it tested, so whether it's a penetration test or even a vulnerability scan, there's multiple kind of early warning systems that you can also sign up for, open source intelligence tools as well, that you can get alerts from, whether a port changes or a service pops up that it is new. Those types of things, again, are all options, but truly understanding the asset and using that in the calculation should help, along with actually testing it. So probably the two key things is understand it and test it equally.
Lovely, thanks, Sam. And it says, are there specific metrics or KPIs that you'd recommend for businesses to track in order to better understand current risk posture?
Yeah, for that, there are kind of two metrics and things, as I mentioned earlier, are typically boiled down to, but there's lots of different strategies for this. But impact and likelihood are normally the key. So using that as a calculated score is going to be one of the core pieces once you've got your risk management in place. However, if you're trying to find external metrics that will kind of highlight different areas of risk or things to consider, looking at trends is going to be the key. So there's lots of tools that you more than likely already have but may not be utilizing. For example, Microsoft 365 in its entirety now is it's sprawled massively, and Microsoft put a lot of effort into providing kind of a base level of information for people. This could be from an increased amount of sign-ins, risky users. You've got specific alerts around email collaboration that are available now, and all of those stats are at minimum available as just a trend. Microsoft has a couple of areas where they give you kind of more information, but at minimum you get a trend. So just being able to analyze the trends and then trying to look at external factors and things like that there are a couple of key events that happen that typically will kind of raise profile, raise risk. So any type of large scale business activity that puts your business under any type of cultural process pressure, that could be from if you're acquiring companies, or if you've had large turnover of staff. Those type of events really highlight your organization to cyber criminals. So having almost a DEFCON level for your organization is going to be something that I always try and get people to think of, because those type of events are stressful enough as they are. However, having somebody there to either partner with or someone internally who's looking at it from a kind of purely a risk angle can be worth its weight in gold, because whilst everybody's trying to get any processes sorted or going through any contracts, things like that, it's a time when the risk creeps in.
So change is going to be a big one.
And the last question, Sam, is can you share any best practices for balancing cybersecurity investment with other business priorities?
Yeah, so there's a couple of examples that I'll use. So the balance is always tricky, and as I said before, every business's risk acceptance and risk tolerance is different, so it's very kind of unique. However, there are a couple of kind of expectations. So typically the priority comes when either it's happened or it's a regulatory or compliance need. That's typically what happens when it boils down to investing in controls and measures. Being able to kind of prove or truly understand the risk on hand is going to be the key. So going through risk management processes, identifying what we've got, and then looking at how we can mitigate it and then how we can remediate it are the two kind of calculations to make. So you have the raw risk. If you do mitigation actions, can you reduce the risk slightly? Typically those mitigation actions, if you go through them, cost nothing. They're normally operational, or actually can be done with a tool you've already purchased or a license. And then your remediation step is normally where there's a larger direct investment of time or money. Rescoring the risk after mitigation and then rescoring it after the expectation of remediation gives you kind of three metrics: do nothing, do something, do everything. And they will all have, or you'll be able to at least estimate how much effort is going to be involved and cost in doing those activities, and the reduction in risk is going to be the key. So if you can take something from, say, your scoring ended up being a 1 to 10, if you can take it from a 10 down to a 7 for free, great. It's just a couple of hours of someone's time, perfect. But if then it costs £1 million to get it down to 1, every business has its own tolerance for that. However, having all of the risks and all of those metrics means you can look at where, I don't necessarily like the phrase, but bang for the buck is going to be the key, is working out what's the best use of time and money across all the risks. And again, concentrating on the critical assets that you have, and that identification right at the beginning of the process is really important, because having a high level of risk in a very, very small area can still be just as damaging as kind of a low risk across everything. So yeah, it is making that calculation, which again is an estimate in quite a lot of cases. However, being able to compare all of your risks and seeing the kind of cost for reduction is the best way to actually make sure you're all happy that that investment's worth it, and get kind of an idea on, and you can kind of forecast as well, especially for the business. If you know that actually you've got this risk on hand at the moment, we might have to accept it because we don't have the finance available for it. However, it can be set as a goal or a plan for the next 6 to 12 months. And there will typically be some sort of mitigation that can be done in most scenarios, regardless of kind of how small, to reduce that risk even ever so slightly, without a huge financial investment.
Perfect, thanks, Sam. And that's all of the questions. So if there are any questions that you wanted to ask and didn't feel comfortable doing in the Q&A, please do send an email to any of the team here at Experience. And yeah, I think that's it now, Sam.
Yeah, just very quick
recap. So quickly cover through the growing cyber threat landscape, and a little look at how to assess and accept risk in business. Practical steps to reduce your exposure. I also had a very quick look at the misconceptions as well on there. We do have an upcoming cyber event, our Demystifying Hackers, which again will be where I mentioned that demo earlier around MFA bypassing and token manipulation. It's going to be on the 20th of March at the Royal Society of Medicine in London, and feel free to join us for that live lab as well. Quick QR code, which is to the event, I can promise you, rather than actually being phishing or straw here.
Perfect. All right, guys. Thank you so much, and we will send out a recording of this webinar to you all, so look out for that in your inboxes. And yeah, as I said, any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to one of the team at Experience, and have a great rest of your week.